Welcome to Salamone, the podcast. With me, Michael Salamone. This week, why progressives should never trust Hillary Clinton. We'll examine her record and more. I will prove to you on this episode that Hillary Clinton is no progressive. I'm Michael Salamone. This is my show. Yep. Welcome to Salamone. I'm Michael Salamone, and now the Sala Show. This week, it's just me, because I want to talk to you, dear listener, about a scam that's been pulled on the American people for the last 25 years. Emboldened by right-wing talking points, the very Republican Clinton family has been masqueraded to the American people as liberals. This episode, I will prove to you now that Hillary Clinton is no progressive, that she and her husband have moved the Democratic Party so far to the right that the Republican Party has responded by moving to the extreme right, and that the 2016 Democratic primary election is America's last chance at saving our two-party system from two corporate-controlled right-wing branches of the same agenda, with only a few social issues dividing them. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my opening remarks. Let's start by looking at her foreign policy, and her views on how to manage the economy are out of line with even the most centrist of Americans, but especially active liberal voters. Over the last few years, Americans have consistently supported a reduction of military presence, especially in the Middle East. Yet Hillary Clinton consistently supported no-fly zones, military action, and the further destabilization of that region. At this point, we're not sure that pulling out of the region would solve any problems, but there's plenty of evidence to suppose that with the war in Iraq, without the toppling of Syrian dictator Assad, without military intervention, there would be no ISIS or migrant crisis. Things would still be bad in the Middle East, but intervention has made them worse. That's not to justify the human rights violations of these regimes, but there are economic means which could have been used to hopefully reduce those rights violations without such a massive loss of property and life. There are diplomatic channels that could have been used, especially by the Secretary of State. Her stance on foreign policy is so out of line with the view of so many Americans. Hillary Clinton has been at the forefront at causing strife in the Middle East. Let's move on to banking. In the early 1990s, the Glass-Steagall Act was repealed by the Clintons. This enabled banks to form massive conglomerates with wide-reaching influence around the financial world. Glass-Steagall was passed shortly after the Great Depression. It was to separate the speculative investment portion of banking from the savings portion of banking. This meant retirement funds, savings account, all these things that Americans depend on to grow their family's future were protected. It does limit profits, but it protects Americans when things go wrong. Many experts have speculated that without repealing Glass-Steagall, the 2008 financial crisis would not have rippled through the middle class like it did. Bernie Sanders was one of those people. He opposed it during the Clinton administration. Hillary Clinton, on the other hand, has come out against breaking up the big banks. She's tried to paint Bernie Sanders as a radical for holding these "if it's too big to fail, it's too big to exist" views. Yet she calls him sexist when he brings up her record. These stances are not progressive. But that's not even touching on Hillary Clinton's long history of shifting her views from flip-flopping to fit the current political climate, to change her opinions to fit what's polling well. First, Senator Hillary Clinton contended that gay marriage should not be approved by New York State voters. Then presidential candidate Clinton told Ellen DeGeneres that gay marriage should be left up to the states, as it always should be. Then a few later, prospective presidential candidate Hillary Clinton comes out in favor of equal rights for every American. Then she goes on Rachel Maddow and says that she was only against it because she feared something far worse was on its way. 30 years ago, Bernie Sanders stood up for equal rights for gay people. But Hillary Clinton just now, when polling is on her side, is in favor of equal rights for gay people. For Exhibit A, I'd like to put in to evidence the list of Hillary Clinton's origin in politics. Hillary was raised in a politically conservative household, and at the age of 13, she canvassed the south side of Chicago for Republicans. Hillary's early political development was shaped most by her high school history teacher, like her father, a fervent anti-communist, who introduced her to Barry Goldwater's classic, The Conscience of a Conservative, which became Hillary's favorite book. Hillary then became a Goldwater girl, volunteering to campaign for the Republican candidate Barry Goldwater in the U.S. presidential election of 1964. A very famous election with civil rights, because Goldwater believed in keeping the races separate. He also believed in campaign tactics, which kept whites and blacks arguing. In 1965, Hillary Clinton enrolled at Wellesley College, where she majored in political science. She served as the president of the Wellesley Young Republicans and actively supported Republicans like John Lindsay and Edward Brooke. Those names, if you're not a student of political science, are important because they are the founders of the modern conservative movement, what became the Reagan Revolution. Hillary's professor, Alan Schechter, assigned Hillary to intern at the House Republican Conference. Hillary was invited by Republican Representative Charles Goodell to help Governor Nelson Rockefeller's campaign for the nomination in 1968. Hillary attended that 1968 Republican National Convention in Miami in support of Nelson Rockefeller. Hillary's senior thesis was a critical exploration of the tactics of radical community organizer Saul Alinsky. Saul Alinsky, who is a hero to many progressives, demonized by Hillary Clinton for her college thesis. And when she finally did come to work for the Democrats, helping on the Watergate prosecution, Hillary Clinton was fired, specifically fired for having a lack of ethics and having no regard for the law. And I would argue to you here today that it is that lack of ethics and disregard for the law which proves that Hillary Clinton is A, not a progressive, and B, unfit to be the Democratic nominee. I enter into evidence Exhibit B, her professional career. Hillary became a savvy business investor. She earned a higher salary than that of her husband from 1978 through 1992. She made a spectacular profit from trading cattle futures, investing $1,000 that generated nearly $100,000 within a year. Hillary incorporated the Whitewater Development Corporation in June 1979, which was to develop vacation property along the White River in Arkansas. She was a partner at the Rose Law Firm while she was First Lady of Arkansas, pulling in $200,000 her first year there. As First Lady, she used her influential stature to, pardon the double-speak, influence the appointment of state judges. In 1986, she was accused of conflict of interest because she was involved in assigning judges that would hear cases involving her firm. As an attorney, she bragged on camera about getting a pedophile off of murder charges. Another conflict of interest arose when the Rose Law Firm began representing a bank that was being investigated by state regulators that her husband Bill had appointed. Hillary was twice named to the National Law Journal as one of the most 100 influential lawyers in America in 1988 and in 1991, and held positions on the corporate board of directors of companies like TCBY, Walmart, and Lafarge. On the board of Walmart, Hillary participated in crafting Walmart's famous anti-labor union policies. and their union busting. So it goes into evidence there that Hillary's corporate background is not exactly ethical either, and that she always favored, in her private sector life, the side of the dollar over the side of the person. So now I enter into Exhibit C, that as senator, Hillary Clinton was unethical in siding with corporate Wall Street interests. In her campaign for senator, Hillary is labeled a carpetbagger by New York residents, since she had never resided in New York or participated in state politics before that race. But Hillary suddenly found religion and became a regular participant in the Senate prayer breakfast as soon as she got there. Still obsessed with corporate profits, she served on the Committee on the Budget. She voted for the USA Patriot Act in October 2001 and again to renew it in 2005, despite civil liberties concerns that the liberals in her party had. She strongly supported the 2001 military action in Afghanistan, and she voted in favor of the 2002 Iraq War Resolution, which authorized George Bush to use military force in Iraq. Any progressive should hold to the value that any Democrat who voted for those wars should never be the head of our party. In 2005, Hillary introduced legislation to increase the size of the United States Army by 80,000 soldiers, and alongside conservative Democrat Joe Lieberman, she introduced the Family Entertainment Protection Act to censor video games. Hillary spent $36 million for her re-election, more than any other candidate in the Senate that year, which was a big critique of progressive Democrats against her. We already saw the writing on the wall of what was going on with campaign finance and that she was abusing it. In the financial crisis of 2007-2008, Hillary supported the bailout of too big to fail financial institutions and voted in favor of the $700 billion bailout, saying that it represented the interests of the American people. Well, I think we've shown just through history that that was categorically false. The middle class has suffered. A wage of $10 an hour, which someone could live on 20 years ago, is now the equivalent of living on about $4 or $5 an hour. Most folks can't pay their bills on it. For Exhibit D, Hillary tried to destroy the progressive base of the Democratic Party when she challenged Obama for the presidency 8 years ago. Hillary's campaign spent over $29 million in Iowa just for the 2008 Iowa caucus. For that amount, she received 70,000 votes. There have been twice as many caucus goers that year than any previous election, and the Clintons both accused President Obama of cheating, declaring that he had bussed supporters in from Illinois. "It's a rigged deal," said Bill Clinton, and they both continued to grouse about Obama cheating, really all the way to the Democratic convention. Campaigning in 2007 and 2008 for that nomination, Hillary had to avoid college campuses because she was getting jeered on camera due to her Senate vote to enable the Bush administration to invade Iraq. This began her practice of avoiding the media, though, as a former reporter when she was a senator in New York, I can tell you that practice started well before. In 2008, Hillary's campaign dragged out a paper that Obama had written as a 5-year-old in kindergarten, in which Obama stated he wanted to be president of the United States one day, and said that it was proof that this is all he's been working for and he would do anything to be president. Pot calling kettle black, I suppose. In December of 2007, 2 of Clinton's volunteers were caught sending out emails that accused Obama of being a Muslim with connections to jihadists who were trying to destroy America. Their research was then picked up by Republicans and used over and over again to paint Obama as un-American and as an Islamic sympathizer. And we still hear these claims to this day, but it's important to remember, progressives, Democrats, the person who started those slanders against our president, that was Hillary Clinton. When Hillary's national co-chair Billy Shaheen started bashing Obama for his admitted drug use as a kid, Hillary supported it, saying, "Good for him," in reference to Sheehan's attack. "Let's push it out." She encouraged her campaign to continue to bash Obama. On Chris Matthews' Hardball, Hillary's campaign manager kept hammering away, referring to cocaine use about 20 times in a head-to-head with an Obama surrogate. They made a huge effort to smear Obama. During the summer of 2008, when it was obvious that Obama was going to be the nominee, Hillary said she was going to stay in the race anyway, referencing RFK's assassination in 1968, and intimating that anything could happen between now and the convention. Michelle Obama took special umbrage to this, as she viewed the comment as a threat to Barack's life, as any good spouse would. In August of 2008, Bill Clinton jump-started what would become the birther issue, as he was on a trip to Africa and pointedly said, "Everybody's got a right to run for president as long as they qualify under the Constitution." It's no question that Bill Clinton and Donald Trump are friends. Isn't it strange that after Bill Clinton started this birther movement, Donald Trump took up the cause? Before he landed in politics, this was just as a private citizen, as a kind of reality star celebrity. Donald Trump followed up on Bill Clinton's claims, this birther conspiracy. So once again, progressives, Democrats, these attacks we've endured on our president, they started with the Clintons. Once Obama was certainly the Democratic nomination, both Hillary and Bill began talking with John McCain about the campaign. She said she admired McCain's views on foreign policy, saying, "Boy, McCain gets it," to voters. The Clintons were outwardly showing that they would be more than happy if McCain got the nomination, because McCain was floating the idea of pledging to be just a one-term presidency, which meant that Hillary could run again in 4 years. Then when McCain chose Sarah Palin, the Obama campaign asked Hillary for help, and she refused to help Obama, and in fact praised McCain's choice of picking a woman, calling the nomination historic, and that Palin would add importance, I want to get this quote right, Palin would add an important new voice to the debate. That's what Hillary Clinton said. That's not a progressive. A progressive doesn't stand up for Sarah Palin. When Hillary finally got out of the race in 2008, polls were showing that a quarter of her supporters switched their support to McCain. So at least 25% of Hillary Clinton supporters are not progressives. There's no way they can be progressives. They would not have switched to McCain. For Exhibit E, I propose that as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton serve the interest of her family and her donors, and not the American people. She lobbied poor countries all over the world to start fracking, despite it being against the Democratic Party's energy policy, which is anti-fracking. She traded arms deals to foreign nations who donated heavily to her Clinton Foundation, a foundation a leading nonprofit watch group said was funneling money to the Clinton family itself. A slush fund, they called it, because 90% of the funds contributed to the Clinton Foundation go to administrative costs, meaning that less than 5% actually serve the charitable interest the foundation purports. Secretary Clinton's hawkish foreign policy, as I mentioned before, advocated for more strife in the Middle East. She funded rebel groups that became what we know as ISIS today. She helped increase drone operations killing innocent women and children. And despite her claims that she's an advocate for women and children, Secretary Clinton favored regimes that were abusive to women and children, such as Saudi Arabia and others. So for Exhibit F, I propose we look at the bold-faced lies. Let's start with one innocent enough but strange just the same, sniper fire. She didn't even have to tell this lie. Supposedly it was to give her some sort of battle experience so she could run for president in 2007, but it made her look foolish. Her daughter was there with her. She said she took sniper fire, when the fact was, no. She and her daughter smiled and waved to the cameras. This year at the Democratic debate, the first one, the only one we've been allowed so far because her former campaign manager is now the head of the DNC and has limited debate, so any challenger to Clinton would get less screen time and fall behind on her bigger name recognition because she's been a political celebrity for 30 years. At that debate, the unspoken lie or non-disclosure was one that I think is so important. The seventh largest contributor to Hillary Clinton's campaign is Time Warner. Time Warner owns CNN. That debate was broadcast on CNN. It was the first debate that the public record was no longer public. CNN owned that debate. And the next day, there was no longer a full unedited version of that debate available to the American people. They edited out about 7 minutes of things that Bernie Sanders said. Of course, had Hillary disclosed that she was taking part in a debate owned by one of her largest campaign contributors, the American people may have had a chance to take into account that, hey, maybe there's some bias towards this woman. Dark money. Dark money is always a problem with Clintons. In her speech at the Jefferson-Jackson, Iowa Democratic Party dinner in October, she said she was going to go after dark money. But meanwhile, the Free Beacon Press, Vox, and so many others have all covered the fact that dark money is flooding into the Clinton campaign's super PACs. Once again, she says one thing and does another. And once again, it's the small press that's covering it, the independent press, not the mainstream. Furthermore, she has lied about all sorts of campaign finance issues. While talking about campaign finance, she takes the same funds she speaks against. She lied about why she supported the Defense of Marriage Act and her so-called standing up to Wall Street, as if, oh, she told them to cut it out. The only standing up to Wall Street that Hillary Clinton has done is to stand up from her desk so she could take their check and then go on to advocate for them. This is all without going into the endless amount of Clinton family scandals and conspiracy theories. As those scandals and conspiracy theories can't be factually sourced or easily Googled, unlike everything else I've told you in this broadcast, I'm not going to go into them. But they are a Google search away for you if you're looking. Though with Google being one of Hillary Clinton's biggest campaign contributors, who knows? All I have to say is my personal opinion. With all we know about Hillary Clinton and her family's unethical bilking of American taxpayers on behalf of their corporate overlords, I mean, a public servant doesn't become worth $200 million just based on a book deal. No, there's just egregious speaking fees that are paid to people she does political favors for. There's just outrageous donations to the Clinton Foundation from foreign countries that we don't want to be in bed with, and from multinational corporations that are destroying the earth and destroying the middle class. The Clintons promote an agenda of war and slaughter throughout the Middle East. They created the prison industrial complex for political talking points. How can we trust a Clinton? How can we not expect some of those conspiracy theories to be true as well? They have proven the bankruptcy of their ethics knows no bounds. So my closing remarks. The Democratic Party has moved to the right because of the Clintons. In the early 1990s, due to the Clintons and their primary fundraiser at the time, Terry McAuliffe, really big money began to pour into the DNC. McAuliffe recruited robust donations from Arco, Chevron, Entergy, Enron, Philip Morris, Montesano, Boeing, Lockheed, Citibank, and more. Many of these corporations had all but abandoned the Democrats during the Reagan era, but McAuliffe lured them back with promises of favorable treatment by a new generation of anti-regulatory Democrats like the Clintons, attuned to the special needs of multinational corporations. This is the mulch bed from which the Clinton presidency took root. Deregulation under the Clinton White House trumped Reagan. Social policy moved to the right. Hillary Clinton worked on health care but said it was pointless to take on the insurance companies. Bill Clinton started the basics of domestic spying that his predecessor would expand upon. Then his wife would help vote to make the Patriot Act law. All the while, the Clinton machine funneled money from corporate America into the Democratic Party, which was no longer friend to the working class and to unions, but now in bed with Wall Street and multinational corporations. Now, Hillary Clinton's former campaign manager, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, is the chair of the Democratic National Committee, and she announced last week that she will be selling seats at the Democratic National Convention to lobbyists. She called it a VIP package. Their sellout game is still afoot. What the Clintons have done to the Democratic Party is a problem for all of American politics. The mainstream media, owned by basically 6 corporations now, all give heavily to the Clinton Foundation. The Intercept has a great article about this out last week. Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, as well as PACs, super PACs, and dark money, all flooded by people who give heavily to the Clinton Foundation, and in return got favors from the State Department when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. But the mainstream media, they cannot be expected to report on these issues. They help paint a false narrative that Hillary Clinton is a progressive, meanwhile funding her very, very conservative campaign. But I think the facts prove that she is not a progressive, and even though that they are pushing her as inevitable to the American people to help further their own corporate agendas that she will serve, I believe that the revolution that Bernie Sanders is talking about is afoot, and progressives are going to take back the Democratic Party. Political pundits who dismiss it are the same ones who dismissed how the Tea Party took over the Republican Party a few years ago, and it's going to be something attuned to that. There will be no real changes under our President Hillary Clinton. There's not going to be much difference from what we saw in the Obama administration. If anything, it'll resemble the George W. Bush administration more. And the Clintons and Bushes, they are good friends. They consider themselves friends. Bill Clinton calls Barbara Bush Mom. They have the same agenda. They work for the same corporate interests. When you vote for Clinton, you're voting for a Bush. It's the same master plan. They try and push this narrative that Republicans are the bad guys and Democrats are the good guys, but really the only difference between our two parties now are abortion and gay rights, and that's it. Every other major social issue that needs to be addressed, specifically income inequality, the disappearing of the middle class, how the dollar is worth so much less than it was, but again, with income inequality being worse than it was in 1774, there are no differences between the corporate Democrats and the GOP. Hillary Clinton's record on these issues is just as falsified as anything else. Sure, she changes her position, says she evolved, and has come over to the same side as people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, but she's never done one thing when it mattered, when it was a vote or an action as a leader that needed to be taken that embraced these principles that progressives hold so dear. The Clinton machine, through funding the Democratic Party with corporate and Wall Street money, has moved the Democratic Party far to the right of what used to be center. No longer is the Democratic Party of Jimmy Carter or of RFK. Since Bill Clinton, we're basically pre-Reagan Republicans. And the Republicans, they've had to move so far to the extreme right, so close to fascist on the right, just to stay as a competitive brand to what the Clintons have created. Progressive values, those of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that were held by both parties, of ending poverty, building a middle class, workers' rights, ending discrimination, and so much more, they're only held on by a few true progressives in the Democratic Party now, like Elizabeth Warren. She might just be the last true progressive in the Democratic Party. So yeah, we welcome an independent like Bernie Sanders into the party, an independent who is a true progressive and has the guts to take on the Clinton machine, because we need him. We need something like this. We need a revolution of people behind him to save the Democratic Party and to save the country as we move further and further to the right. Income inequality just shrinks and shrinks the middle class. We have two distinct classes of the very working poor and the extremely wealthy. In closing, listen, you can support Hillary Clinton all you want. It's still a free country in that respect. But don't you dare say that she's a progressive. True Democrats like Jimmy Carter or RFK would be disgusted by how the Clintons have destroyed the Democratic Party. And I certainly am. I'm Michael Salamone. Thanks for tuning in. And please, please, be good to one another. Cheers.
Salamone is a podcast taped live for a streaming internet audience. And archives can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, everywhere you find a podcast these days, and on michaelsalamone.com. Subscribe!